and a warm welcome to Personal Finance. I'm Gugulethu Cele. Now today in studio I'm joined by Yudhvir Seetharam, Head of Analytics at FNB Business, for a look at what startup entrepreneurs need to look out for beginning their business plans and business ideas and forging ahead with these particular goals in 2016. Good to have you with us this evening, Yudhvir.
Thank you. Perfect.
Perhaps let's pick up on 2016. We tend to talk about the news headlines quite a bit. So it's market volatility, interest rates are going up, sluggish growth in the economy. Is 2016 a good time for one to start a business?
So try to think of it in terms of we want more people to start businesses, irrespective of what's happening in the economic climate out there. The primary thing that you need is to understand that no matter what happens to the economy, you as an individual, as an entrepreneur, need to get your business up and running.
Sure.
And if you can get it going in the toughest of times, when things become right, at a couple, once the economy recovers, it's smooth sailing from there.
Where do I start? Because one would think I need some kind of collateral in order to get financing, and then everything else would fall into place.
So that's a bit of a misnomer. So a lot of the time you have startup entrepreneurs that want to seek capital. So in other words, they start their businesses let's call it early in their life cycle. Initially you should do something called bootstrapping, where you try to save up money either in the form of savings or loans from family, friends, etc.
Or some people cash out their pensions, right? Which is not what we advise, though.
Exactly. So trying to be on the bit more of the risk-averse side of things, where you do a bit of bootstrapping to have a good foundation to start off with. So you at least are established for, let's say, the first year or so. Thereafter, once you have that foundation, then you can start looking at, okay, how do you want to expand and grow in terms of credit opportunities?
So that's the beginning point, as you mentioned, when it comes to financing. Another key question that always comes to mind is making sure that there's a competitive advantage that you have when it comes to the industry and your peers. Is that where homework and research needs to start off with?
By all means. We have in South Africa, let's say 10 businesses that start every year. The failure rate in the first year of those businesses is close to 7 out of 10.
Sure.
And the majority of times, look, it could be due to capital. We talked about that issue. A lot of the times also it's due to, let's call it, lack of inadequate planning or resources. So how do you know that your product is actually suitable for the market? How do you know that you've priced your product correctly? How do you know that there's not going to be an innovation in the market that changes, say, telephones to cell phones? So undergoing that market research at the very beginning, that becomes a crucial step in understanding where the gap in the market actually is, and can you then fulfill the need for that gap?
Does this separate, I'm tempted to say the boys from the men, but fundamentally entrepreneurs from service providers? Because that's where the innovative thinking needs to come into play, as you allude to, when it comes to research.
Correct. So your entrepreneurs would be people that want to find a gap that can be capitalized upon by bringing in a new product, versus a service provider where, let's call it, a temporary solution, where right now we need cell phones, and as a result, let's go and jump into that bandwagon. When the times change and the trend changes, let's then try and do something else. So in some circles, they are considered similar, where an entrepreneur is pretty much someone who creates a business. Whether it's 1, 2, 3 across time, you are innovating. In other circles, an entrepreneur versus a service provider, quite distinct entities.
Exactly. It takes us back to the B word, which sometimes on the show refers to a budget, but in this scenario it refers to a business plan. What does it entail, and what needs to be in there to provide confidence in the stakeholders and shareholders who might want to take an interest in my company?
So a business plan is meant for you, the entrepreneur, to convey your thoughts in a comprehensive manner to, as you said, stakeholders or future shareholders, right? So you need to make sure that you have all of the nitty-gritty stuff in there. What are the risks that you're taking? We talked about the product stuff. So apart from the product, the research, the market research, what are the risks that you're taking? How are you going to minimize those risks? So let's say when the economic climate goes against you, is that considered a risk? In some cases, based on your business, it might be. In other cases, it might be, yes, it's happening, but I'm still fundamentally doing the same thing. So you need to outline the risks and also the challenges or ways to minimize those risks. Further, you would also need, and this is crucial to every business, you need to have financials, or at least some view of budgeting and financials. How do you think your business is going to perform in the next year, 3 years, 5 years?
Can't I suck those fingers, those numbers?
By all means, you can. However, the downside here is that you're talking to people that want you to provide you capital, right? So you need to give them them concrete facts on top of the, granted there's optimism and subjectivity in that, however you need to give them concrete facts to say, my business I project to run at a profit or a revenue of X amount, after costs here's what I'm going to be left with. Do you think this trend over the next 3 years is going to be good enough for you to give me money to invest?
Precisely. There's something that you mentioned earlier on though, which is the risks and the kind of exposure you have to these risks. But more importantly, risk management. Can risk actually be managed? And I put it in a scenario where we've got the droughts taking place at the moment and the water shortage, the currency volatility. If I'm just running a startup company here, what kind of policies and measures do I need to put in place to be able to manage these risks?
So we can separate them into, let's call them internal risks, the risks that you face that are in your control to manage, versus external. So no matter what you do, it's very difficult to influence, say, the drought or the economy, right? Granted, there are deeper issues to probe into there, but on the face of it, it's difficult for you to influence those two things. So in the case of, let's say, an exporter, currency risk becomes a lot bigger an issue compared to someone selling local goods in South Africa, right? So even though currency risk is an outside factor that you cannot influence, in this context of you not being an exporter, it doesn't really apply. It has a very low impact if it does occur. Similarly with the economy, if you are, they call them defensive type businesses, where if the economy is doing well, you do well. If the economy is doing badly, you still do well. You have something that goes, let's say, stable or stabilized across the economic cycle or the economic conditions. So those type of risks might be present. However, how they impact you depends on the nature of your business.
Makes sense now. Yudhvir, there's also a new concept regarding cash flow. It's not a new concept. It's a very important concept for small businesses, as I understand, because fundamentally money coming in, money going out. There we go. That's what actually keeps these young entrepreneurs thriving. Why is that an important measure to actually look at?
So we spoke about the business plan idea. You need to be able to forecast on and project what your future revenue is going to be. Step one of that entire process is to know what you're doing right now. As of today, how much of money have you got in? How much of money do you have going out? And are you net positive or net negative? Once you have that view, you can start building up a history, and you can get to a trend to say, if my business has done so well in the past year or 6 months, how well do I think it will do in the following year or 6 months? Right? So you start off with the current point in time and you try to forecast and predict what will happen in the future. That being said, the skill set needed to go and do something like that, we are not accountants, we are businessmen, right? So as much as you need to understand the basics of accounting and law and all these other facets of running a business, what you see happening from service providers, including financial institutions, are packages designed to help those needs.
Is there a correlation as well with cash flow together with raising capital?
In a sense, there is. So the higher your cash flow, it kind of becomes a catch-22. If you have lots of money left over after you've done your expenses, do you really need an outside investor to help you with capital? So it's a catch-22 of, do you want to save money for, say, future expansion, branches, or whatever the type of product lines, for as another example? Or equivalently, do you want to put money away for a rainy day, invest it, say at an interest rate of whatever %, in order for outside stakeholders to come in and invest in your business? Apart from bringing in money, your shareholders, your venture capitalists, etc., they bring in experience and mentorship. So again, it's what do you get all of that in a package? Or do you say, cool, I'm quite happy with my cash flow, let me simply continue on by myself?
Exactly. To come back to another theme now for a moment, it goes back to the customer, because as an entrepreneur, you're providing a service or selling a product.
Correct.
And I'm going to use cakes, for example, because maybe that's what might apply to the audience here. When you have trends like banting trends and new diets that come out, what does this tell us about the entrepreneur and the approach to the product or service that they're rendering, and also remaining relevant to the transforming times?
So we spoke about the risks, what's outside of your control, and we also spoke about the idea of market research and trying to have that's up to date. So combine those two together with the cake selling example, right? If something gets innovated out there, banting diets, diet X, diet Y, that's outside of your control for the most part, So it's up to you to say, my product is stable enough to withstand those trends, right? I'm going to forecast into the next year, 3 years, etc., that I'm going to still do well. Or if that risk is considered very big or very high impact to your business, then it points towards maybe you need to let's say, not reinvent the wheel, but change your strategy of either reducing the calories of the products that you sell, or maybe even introducing more product lines.
Well, we've certainly said quite a bit. Let's get a quick recap, rather, of the key takeaway points from tonight's discussion. Yudhvir, we've certainly delved on quite a lot of aspects and elements here, but for anyone who's looking to start up their company in 2016, perhaps a quick reminder as to what key elements to look out for this year.
Cool. So number one, we spoke about the time is always ever right to start a business. There is no such thing as a good time or a bad time. If you can start a business when times are tough, such as what we're experiencing in 2016, and you can survive, you're only going to do that much better when times become much better, right? So we also talked about the idea of having a solid market research backing your product. So do you understand the industry? Do you understand what you're selling? Are you fulfilling a need out there in the market, or is it simply a service provider? That ties into creating a solid business plan. So in the event you want to explain to outside stakeholders or shareholders, what are you doing? Do you have your ideas put down on paper? And to that, you need to make sure that you manage risks. What can be controlled, what can't be controlled. Are they going to have a large impact on your business, such as the diet example, or a low impact on your business? And it doesn't really matter. We're going to be stable. And lastly, we spoke about how crucial it is to manage cash flow. In order to come to the fancy projections and forecasts, you need to have the basics right. So understanding the cash flow, the simple in and out of your business in terms of financial flows, that's crucial to forecasting where you will end up.
To close off with, I think another key element, as you allude to, is that you get the financing, you get all the controls, and the business plan is a star document which gets every investor's eyes beaming. But fundamentally, if you do have trouble, seek some kind of advice, right?
Correct. So at the end of it, you have an idea. Can you execute it? That gives a testimony to the strength and courage of an entrepreneur. And at times, we are always going to need advice and mentorship from others that have been through this process. So by all means, the more advice that you can get, the better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
That's where we'll leave it for Personal Finance this evening. A big thank you once more to Yudhvir Seetharam, who's the head of analytics at FNB Business, for joining us tonight. You too can be part of the conversations and tell us what business you're keen on starting in 2016. And if you believe that the timing is correct, like Yudhvir alluded to, you can tweet your comments to @CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410, or to myself @Gugulethu. Until next time, have a wonderful evening.